has a strange way of humbling people, especially those who are absolutely convinced they're right. That's exactly what happened inside a small-town diner when an arrogant sheriff dragged a quiet single father across the floor and slapped handcuffs on him in front of everyone. Some customers watched in silence. Others even applauded. But no one inside that diner realized they were witnessing the final moments of the sheriff's career, because the man being arrested wasn't running from the FBI. He was the FBI. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories where justice catches up with the people who least expect it, take a moment to subscribe. We have many more unforgettable stories waiting for you, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's get into today's story. The morning rush had already filled nearly every seat inside Maggie's diner. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Bacon crackled on the grill behind the counter. Waitresses weaved between crowded booths, while old country music played softly from a weathered jukebox that had probably been there longer than anyone could remember. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Everyone except the man sitting in the corner booth. 8-year-old Lily Kane carefully poured maple syrup onto her pancakes before looking across the table. "Dad?" Gabriel looked up from his coffee. "Yes." She held up one of the pancakes with a grin. "This one looks like you." He studied it seriously. "It has ears." "So, I don't have ears that big." Lily burst into laughter. "They're not ears. They're pancakes." Gabriel smiled. "That's much better." She giggled again. "You almost believed me." "I did." He reached across the table and gently wiped a streak of syrup from the corner of her mouth. "You missed a spot. I was saving it for later." She nodded confidently. "You never know when you might need emergency syrup." Gabriel laughed quietly. "I'll remember that." To anyone watching, they looked like an ordinary father and daughter. No expensive clothes, no flashy jewelry, no loud conversations. Just two people enjoying breakfast before school. Exactly how Gabriel wanted it. He checked the clock above the counter. 7:17 a.m. Still on schedule. Lily noticed. "You keep looking at the time." "I do." "You've looked 3 times." "You counted." "I always count." He smiled. "I should be more careful." She leaned forward. "You're thinking about work." "A little." "I thought today was your day off." "It is." "Then stop thinking about work." Gabriel chuckled. "That's good advice." "I know." Their waitress, Emma, approached carrying a fresh pot of coffee. "Morning, you two." "Morning," Gabriel replied. Emma topped off his mug before smiling at Lily. "And how are the pancakes today?" Lily gave her a thumbs up. 10 out of 10. Emma laughed. "I'll tell Maggie." As she turned to leave, Lily called after her. "Can you tell her the bacon gets an 11? Emma grinned. "I think she'd like hearing that even more." Several nearby customers smiled. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Outside, a sheriff's SUV rolled past the diner. Then another. Gabriel noticed them through the window. He said nothing. Instead, he calmly stirred his coffee. Lily tilted her head. "What are you looking at?" "The weather." She glanced outside. There aren't any clouds. Exactly. She frowned. I don't get it. You don't have to. She shrugged. Adults are weird. I've heard that before. The bell above the front door suddenly jingled. Conversations faded almost instantly. The cheerful atmosphere seemed to drain from the room. Several customers lowered their voices. One elderly couple stopped talking altogether. Even Emma's smile disappeared. Sheriff Wade Collins had arrived. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with a broad frame that filled the doorway. A polished badge gleamed against his pressed uniform. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes despite the overcast morning. 2 deputies followed behind him. Neither looked nearly as confident. Wade slowly removed his sunglasses. His gaze swept across the diner. One table, then another, until his eyes stopped on Gabriel. He stared long enough for one of the deputies to notice. You know him, Sheriff. Wade didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and unfolded a wrinkled sheet of paper. It was a grainy surveillance photograph from a convenience store robbery 3 nights earlier. The suspect wore a baseball cap. The image was blurry, the face barely visible, but the beard, the height, the build, to Wade, that was enough. A smug smile spread across his face. Well, he muttered, my lucky day. Gabriel calmly picked up another piece of toast. He hadn't even looked toward the sheriff. Lily was busy trying to stack 2 pancakes on top of each other. She never noticed the danger walking toward them. Heavy boots echoed across the wooden floor. Each step seemed louder than the last. The entire diner watched. Sheriff Wade stopped beside their booth. You. Gabriel slowly looked up. Good morning. Stand up. Gabriel remained seated. May I ask why? Because I said so. Lily looked between the 2 men. Her smile had vanished. Gabriel folded his napkin neatly beside his plate before standing. He met the sheriff's eyes without the slightest hint of fear. How can I help you? Wade crossed his arms. You're new in town. We moved here recently. Name? Gabriel Kane. Where do you come from? Arizona. What do you do? I work. The sheriff smirked. Funny. Gabriel's expression never changed. I wasn't trying to be. Without another word, Sheriff Wade grabbed Gabriel's arm. Hard. The entire diner flinched. Lily immediately stood. Hey. Gabriel looked at her. It's okay. Wade jerked him away from the booth. You match the description of an armed robbery suspect. Gabriel remained calm. I'd be happy to answer your questions. You can answer them at the station. I think you've made a mistake. I don't make mistakes. Maggie stepped out from behind the counter. Sheriff, he's been eating breakfast here almost every morning. I've never seen him cause any trouble. Wade turned sharply. You questioning my judgment? No. Then stay out of it. The old woman reluctantly stepped back. Lily grabbed onto her father's sleeve. Daddy. Gabriel gently squeezed her hand. It's all right. Her eyes filled with tears. No, it isn't. You didn't do anything. One deputy shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff, maybe we should confirm. I said I've got him. The deputy fell silent. Then, without warning, Wade shoved Gabriel across the diner. His body crashed against a nearby table. Coffee spilled. Plates shattered across the floor. Customers gasped. Before Gabriel could even straighten himself, steel cuffs snapped tightly around his wrists. Click! The sound echoed through the diner. Lily screamed. "Dad!" She ran toward him. A deputy instinctively stepped between them. "Please," she cried. He didn't do anything. Nobody moved. One customer quietly looked away. Another whispered, "I guess they finally caught him." A man near the counter nodded approvingly. "Good. One less criminal." Others actually applauded. Gabriel slowly turned toward Lily. His voice remained calm. "Look at me." She wiped away her tears. "I need you to be brave. I don't want you to go. I know. You promise you'll come back." Gabriel smiled. "I've never broken a promise to you." She nodded. "I know." Sheriff Wade shoved Gabriel toward the front door. Just before stepping outside, Gabriel glanced at the clock above the counter. 7:26 a.m. Then he looked at his watch. A faint smile appeared for the briefest moment. So small, no one noticed. He quietly whispered, "Right on time." The sheriff forced him into the back of the patrol SUV. As the vehicle pulled away, across the street, a black SUV sat parked behind a row of trees. Inside, a man wearing an earpiece watched the patrol car disappear. He calmly pressed a button on a secure radio, then spoke 5 quiet words. "Package secured. Begin phase 2. The patrol SUV rolled through the quiet streets of Ashwood. Its flashing lights reflected off storefront windows as curious townspeople stopped to watch. Some pointed, others whispered. Word spread quickly in a town this small. The sheriff caught someone. "I heard it was the robbery suspect. They say he was dangerous." Inside the back seat, Gabriel Kane sat with his hands cuffed behind him. His posture never changed. His breathing remained slow. His eyes calmly followed the passing streets, as though he were simply watching another ordinary morning unfold. Sheriff Wade Collins glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "I've arrested hundreds of people." Gabriel looked up. "Have you?" Every single one of them had something to say. Gabriel smiled faintly. "I'm sure they did." Wade frowned. "You don't seem worried." Gabriel looked back out the window. "Worry doesn't usually solve much." The sheriff chuckled. "We'll see how calm you are after a few hours in my interrogation room." Gabriel didn't answer. The silence irritated Wade far more than an argument ever could. Back at Maggie's diner, Lily still stood near the doorway. Her small hands were clenched into fists. Tears rolled quietly down her cheeks. She kept staring at the road, where the patrol SUV had disappeared, as if willing it to come back. Maggie slowly walked over and knelt beside her. "Sweetheart." Lily didn't respond. "He'll come back." Lily finally looked at her. "He always keeps his promises." Maggie forced a smile. "I believe that." Before she could say anything else, the bell above the diner door chimed. A woman in her mid-30s stepped inside wearing jeans, a navy jacket, and dark sunglasses. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Her eyes immediately found Lily. She approached without hesitation. "Lily." little girl looked up. "Yes," the woman smiled warmly. "I'm Rachel. Your aunt asked me to pick you up." Maggie frowned. "I thought Gabriel said no family lived nearby." Rachel calmly reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't an identification card. It was a simple drawing. A bear holding a fishing pole. Lily's eyes lit up instantly. "My drawing." Rachel nodded. "Your dad asked me to give this to you if plans changed." On the back, written in Gabriel's handwriting, were 4 words. "Trust her, I'll explain." Lily immediately wiped away her tears. "Okay." Maggie looked confused. "You know her?" Lily shook her head. "No, but Dad does." Without another question, she took Rachel's hand. As they walked toward the parking lot, Rachel discreetly touched the small microphone hidden beneath her jacket. Protective package secured. A calm voice answered through her earpiece. "Copy that." The Ashwood Sheriff's office sat at the edge of town, a brick building that looked more like an old courthouse than a police station. Sheriff Wade escorted Gabriel through the front entrance. Every deputy looked up. "Morning, Sheriff." Wade grinned. "Morning. What have we got?" "The robbery suspect." Several deputies immediately stared at Gabriel. One of the younger officers frowned. "He doesn't look like the guy from the bulletin." Wade shot him a glare. "Looks close enough." The room fell quiet. Nobody questioned him again. Gabriel was led into processing. A deputy removed the handcuffs. "Empty your pockets." Gabriel calmly complied. His wallet, a set of car keys, a worn leather notebook, a family photograph of him, and Lily standing beside a lake. $23. A plain black pen. The deputy picked it up. "Nice pen." Gabriel smiled. "It writes." The deputy laughed. "I figured." Everything was placed into an evidence bag. Sheriff Wade picked up the photograph. He studied it. "So, single dad." Gabriel nodded. "My wife passed away." "When?" 5 years ago." For the first time, Wade hesitated, only for a second. Then the arrogance returned. "Should have thought about your daughter before robbing a convenience store." Gabriel looked him directly in the eyes. "I do think about her. Every day." The answer caught the room off guard. Not because of what he said, because of how sincerely he said it. Gabriel was escorted into a holding cell. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind him. Clang. He sat quietly on the narrow bench, crossed one ankle over the other, and waited. Across the hallway, Sheriff Wade entered his office. He tossed the evidence bag onto his desk, then picked up Gabriel's notebook. He flipped through every page, blank, except the final page. There, written in neat handwriting, was a single sentence. "Patience reveals what force never can." Wade rolled his eyes. "What is this?" "Fortune cookie philosophy." He crumpled the page and threw it into the trash. Then he leaned back in his chair, satisfied. A knock came at the door. Deputy Mason stepped inside. "The convenience store owner is here." "Bring him in." A nervous, middle-aged man entered. Sheriff Wade held up Gabriel's photograph. "That's him, right?" The man studied the picture, then looked through the office window toward Gabriel's cell. He hesitated. I'm not sure. Wade's expression hardened. What do you mean you're not sure? The robber had a beard. So does he. Yes, but it happened fast. It was dark. I can't honestly say that's the same man. The sheriff slammed the photograph onto the desk. You already gave your statement. I know, but now that I see him up close, I'm just not certain. Wade stood. His voice dropped. Think carefully. The store owner swallowed hard, then lowered his eyes. If you say it's him. Gabriel watched the exchange from inside his cell, without saying a word. Minutes later, the station grew quiet. Most deputies returned to their paperwork. Sheriff Wade closed his office door. He picked up Gabriel's black pen from the evidence bag, twisting it between his fingers. Cheap thing. He tossed it carelessly back onto the desk, never realizing a tiny indicator light hidden beneath the clip blinked once, then disappeared more than 70 miles away, inside an unmarked federal command vehicle. A technician suddenly looked up from a bank of computer screens. A green signal flashed across one monitor. Signal acquired. The room instantly became alert. A woman wearing an FBI tactical jacket adjusted her headset. Audio. The technician nodded. Loud and clear. The woman smiled. About time. She pressed a button. Command to all surveillance teams. We have eyes. We have ears. Maintain positions. No one moves until Agent Kane gives us the window. Across the room, the operation commander folded his arms as the sheriff's voice began playing through the speakers. A slow smile spread across his face. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Sheriff Wade Collins had expected many things. Anger, fear, excuses, begging. Instead, he got silence. Not the nervous kind, not the defeated kind, the kind of silence that made every word coming out of his own mouth sound louder than it should. He hated it. Gabriel Kane sat alone inside the holding cell. His elbows rested on his knees. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. To anyone watching, he looked like a man accepting his fate. But behind those calm eyes, he was listening. Every voice, every footstep, every conversation, every careless mistake, exactly as he had been trained to do. Sheriff Wade stormed back into the booking area, carrying a foam cup of coffee. He stopped outside the cell. You hungry? Gabriel looked up. A little. Wade smirked. Maybe next time, don't rob convenience stores. Gabriel calmly folded his hands. You seem convinced. I don't need convincing. I've got instincts. Gabriel nodded once. Instincts are useful. They are. They're also wrong sometimes. The sheriff laughed. Mine aren't. Gabriel simply looked at him, said nothing. That silence irritated Wade even more. Deputy Mason approached, carrying a folder. Sheriff, the convenience store owner called again. What now? He said. Mason hesitated. He's still not certain Mr. Kane is the man. Wade snatched the folder from his hands. He already gave his statement. I know, but he's asking if we should arrange a formal lineup. Wade tossed the folder onto a nearby desk. We don't need one, but procedure. I said we don't need one. Mason slowly nodded. Yes, Sheriff. Gabriel quietly watched the exchange. Without saying a word, 10 minutes later, the station settled into its normal rhythm. Phones rang, printers hummed, deputies completed paperwork. Sheriff Wade walked into his office and shut the door behind him. He didn't notice that Gabriel's pen still rested inside the evidence bag on the corner of his desk. Its tiny microphone captured everything, more than 70 miles away. Inside the FBI command vehicle, voices echoed through overhead speakers. The technician adjusted the audio. Signal is perfect. Special Agent Rachel Brooks folded her arms. So far, the technician smiled. So far, Operation Commander Daniel Mercer stood quietly behind them. Nobody interrupts. Nobody reacts. We let him talk. Every agent in the room nodded. Back inside the sheriff's office, a knock came at the door. Come in. A heavy-set man, wearing an expensive suit, stepped inside. He closed the door behind him before speaking. You wanted to see me. Sheriff Wade leaned back in his chair. I heard one of your trucks got stopped yesterday. The businessman sighed. My driver talked too much. He usually does. You fix it. Wade shrugged. For the right price. The businessman reached into his jacket, removed a thick envelope, placed it on the desk. It landed with a dull thud. Neither man mentioned money. Neither had to. Wade casually slid the envelope into his desk drawer. I'll make the paperwork disappear. The businessman smiled. I knew I could count on you. Inside the command vehicle, nobody spoke. The technician quietly marked the recording. Bribery, time-stamped, evidence secured. Commander Mercer didn't smile. He simply said, keep rolling. Back at the station, the businessman stood. Oh, one more thing. The county inspector keeps asking questions. Wade waved dismissively. I'll handle him. And if he doesn't stop, the sheriff took another sip of coffee. He'll stop, one way or another. The businessman nodded. I figured. He quietly left the office. Deputy Mason entered almost immediately afterward. You wanted these reports signed. Wade skimmed the paperwork, then stopped. What happened to the arrest report from Friday? The one involving Marcus Hill. Yeah, I filed it. Wade frowned. Change it. What? Take out the part about excessive force. Mason looked uncomfortable. But the body camera, I already deleted it. The deputy stared at him. You deleted evidence. Wade looked directly into his eyes. You planning on repeating that outside this office? Mason swallowed. No, Sheriff. Good. Rewrite the report. Yes, Sheriff. Gabriel slowly leaned back against the concrete wall, still saying nothing, still listening. Inside the command vehicle, another agent looked toward Commander Mercer. We've got destruction of evidence. Mercer nodded. Log it. The technician typed rapidly. Every confession, every threat, every illegal instruction, each one neatly cataloged. Months of suspicion were turning into proof. Late that afternoon, Sheriff Wade unlocked Gabriel's cell. Interview room. Gabriel calmly stood. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists once again as Wade escorted him down the hallway. Several deputies watched. One whispered, "Guy's either incredibly brave or completely crazy." Another shook his head. "I've never seen anyone this calm." The interrogation room was small. Gray walls, metal table, 2 chairs, a single camera mounted high in the corner. Wade sat across from Gabriel. He tossed the blurry surveillance photograph onto the table. "There, recognize him?" Gabriel studied the picture. "It's blurry. Answer the question." "I recognize a photograph." The sheriff sighed. "You enjoy making things difficult." Gabriel met his eyes. "No, I enjoy telling the truth." Wade leaned forward. "You know, I could make your life miserable." Gabriel remained expressionless. "You already have me in handcuffs." "Oh, I'm talking about your daughter." The room instantly grew colder. Gabriel's eyes never left Wade. His voice remained calm. "What about her? I hear Child Protective Services takes an interest when fathers get arrested." He smiled. "Would be a shame if she ended up somewhere else." For the first time all day, Gabriel's expression changed. Not fear, not anger, disappointment. He slowly lowered his eyes, then looked back up. "I hope," he said quietly, "you don't speak to every child in this town through threats." The sheriff laughed. "I speak whatever language people understand." Miles away, inside the FBI command vehicle, no one moved. The recording continued playing through the speakers. Rachel clenched her jaw. "He's threatening a witness." Commander Mercer raised one hand. "Stay focused. We're almost there." Another technician looked up from his screen. "We've crossed the legal threshold." Mercer nodded slowly. "I know." He picked up a secure phone, dialed one number. The call connected almost instantly. "We're ready." There was a brief pause. Then he spoke the words every agent had been waiting months to hear. "Request final authorization to execute Operation Iron Shield." The voice on the other end answered without hesitation. "Authorization granted." Mercer slowly lowered the phone, then looked around the command vehicle. For the first time that day, he smiled. "Let's bring our agent home." The Ashwood Sheriff's Office looked no different than it had the day before. Deputies answered phones. Printers hummed. Coffee brewed in the break room. Citizens walked in to report stolen bicycles, barking dogs, and noisy neighbors. To everyone outside, it was another ordinary day. Inside, an 18-month federal operation had entered its final hours, and almost no one knew it. Sheriff Wade Collins walked out of the interrogation room, wearing the same smug smile he'd walked in with. Deputy Mason followed several steps behind. "Should I process him for transfer?" Wade shook his head. "Not yet. You keeping him overnight?" "I haven't decided." Mason hesitated. "If he's innocent." The sheriff stopped walking, slowly turned around. His smile disappeared. "You still questioning me?" "No, Sheriff." "Then stop acting like a defense attorney." Mason lowered his head. "Yes, Sheriff." Wade walked away without another word. The younger deputy stood frozen for several seconds. Something about all of this didn't feel right anymore. Inside the holding cell, Gabriel Kane quietly leaned against the concrete wall. The cell was cold, silent, almost empty. Most people would have paced, complained, demanded answers. Gabriel simply waited. His breathing remained slow, measured, patient. A passing deputy glanced inside. "You okay?" Gabriel looked up. "I've had worse waiting rooms." The deputy laughed before catching himself. He looked around to make sure Wade wasn't nearby. "I'm sorry about all this." Gabriel smiled politely. "Thank you." The deputy nodded once before continuing down the hallway. Across town, Rachel guided Lily into a small lakeside cabin hidden among tall pine trees. It looked like an ordinary vacation home. Inside, it was anything but ordinary. 3 FBI agents monitored live surveillance feeds. Laptops covered the dining table. Maps of Ashwood County hung across one wall. Radio traffic quietly filled the room. Lily looked around curiously. "So," Rachel smiled, "this is your dad's office?" Lily laughed. "It doesn't look like an office." "It isn't. That's what makes it useful." One of the agents turned around with a friendly smile. "Morning, Lily." She waved. "Hi." The agent opened a refrigerator. "Chocolate milk." Lily's face brightened. "Please." Rachel couldn't help smiling. Even during a major federal operation, someone had remembered chocolate milk. Lily sat at the kitchen table, sipping quietly. She noticed dozens of photographs spread across the maps. Some showed warehouses. Others showed county officials. One photograph showed Sheriff Wade Collins shaking hands with the businessman who had visited him earlier that morning. Lily pointed at it. "That's the man who yelled at Dad." Rachel nodded. "It is. Dad said some people wear uniforms, and some people only wear costumes." Rachel looked at her. "What did he mean?" Lily shrugged. "He said, good people don't have to remind everyone they're good." Rachel smiled softly. "Your father says a lot with very few words." "He always does." Back at the sheriff's office, Wade stood in the evidence room. He stared at Gabriel's belongings. Wallet, keys, notebook, photograph, pen. Nothing looked unusual. He picked up the family photograph again. Gabriel and Lily stood beside a lake, both smiling. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Some promises are worth risking everything to keep." The sheriff scoffed. "Sentimental." He tossed the photograph back into the evidence bag, still completely unaware that the pen beside it continued transmitting every sound. 72 miles away, inside the FBI Mobile Command Center, technicians monitored every word. Commander Daniel Mercer stood behind them with folded arms. "Status: warrants are moving." Judge reviewing the final affidavit. Mercer nodded. "No mistakes. I don't want a single technicality." One of the attorneys looked up from her laptop. "You won't get one. We've documented bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, extortion, obstruction, and abuse of authority." She closed the folder. "It's enough." Mercer looked toward Gabriel's live audio feed. "Now we let him finish." Inside the station, Sheriff Wade unlocked Gabriel's holding cell once again. Walk. Gabriel stood. Where are we going? You ask a lot of questions. I like knowing where I'm headed. Wade smirked. Interview room. Again, the handcuffs clicked around Gabriel's wrists. Again, they walked the same hallway, past the same desks, past the same deputies. But this time, something had changed. Several deputies avoided looking at Gabriel, not because they feared him, because they were beginning to doubt their sheriff. The interrogation room felt even smaller than before. Wade tossed another file onto the table. You know what I hate? Gabriel remained silent. People who think they're smarter than everyone else. He leaned back. You've barely said 20 words since I arrested you. Gabriel looked at him. Would you prefer I lied? The sheriff laughed. No, I'd prefer you confessed. I can't confess to something I didn't do. The answer came without hesitation, without emotion. It irritated Wade all over again. He stood and walked toward the window, overlooking the station floor. You know why I've kept this town safe for 15 years? Gabriel didn't answer. Because people fear consequences. He turned back around. They fear me. Gabriel studied him quietly. No, the sheriff frowned. What? They fear your badge. The room fell silent. Gabriel continued. There's a difference. For just a second, Wade's confidence cracked. Only for a moment. Then the arrogance returned. You think you're a philosopher? Gabriel smiled faintly. No, I've just met a lot of men who confused authority with respect. Miles away, Rachel looked toward Commander Mercer. He got him talking again. Mercer nodded. Gabriel never pushes. He lets people reveal themselves. The youngest agent in the room looked amazed. He's interrogating the sheriff without asking any questions. Mercer smiled. That's why he's one of the best undercover agents I've ever worked with. Back inside the interrogation room, a deputy knocked on the door. Sheriff, what? The federal courthouse just called. Wade frowned. What do they want? They said a judge has been trying to reach you all morning. The sheriff rolled his eyes. It can wait. They said it sounded urgent. I said, it can wait. The deputy quietly closed the door. Neither man noticed that Gabriel's eyes briefly shifted toward the clock. 3:42 p.m. Almost time. Inside the mobile command center, one technician suddenly sat upright. The warrants just cleared. The room instantly became quiet. The attorney looked up from her screen. Signed. The technician nodded. Every single one. Commander Mercer slowly picked up his radio. Around him, agents began putting on tactical vests. Others checked radios. Weapons were secured. Vehicle engines started outside. Mercer pressed the transmit button. His calm voice echoed through dozens of earpieces across Ashwood County. This is command. All teams. He paused, then smiled. Move into position. Commander Daniel Mercer looked out the windshield of the lead SUV. Ahead of him, Ashwood Sheriff's office stood exactly where it always had. Quiet, ordinary, completely unaware that its final peaceful moments were slipping away. He checked his watch. 3:47 p.m. then pressed the radio clipped to his vest. Team 1, in position. Team 2, ready. Team 3, standing by. One by one, every response came back. The trap had finally closed. Inside the sheriff's office, nothing seemed unusual. Deputy Mason was finishing paperwork. Another deputy was answering a phone call about a stolen tractor. Someone laughed in the break room. Sheriff Wade Collins leaned comfortably against the interrogation table. So, he folded his arms. You finally ready to cooperate? Gabriel Kane calmly looked across the table. I already have. The sheriff laughed. No, you've barely said anything. Gabriel smiled faintly. Sometimes, people say the most when nobody interrupts them. Wade frowned. What does that even mean? Gabriel didn't answer. Suddenly, a deputy hurried into the room. Sheriff, what? There's... He hesitated. A lot of vehicles pulling into the parking lot. Wade shrugged. So, they're black SUVs. So, they're all coming here. The sheriff rolled his eyes. Maybe the governor's lost. The deputy didn't laugh. Something in his expression made Wade turn toward the window. Outside, 1, 2, 5, 10 black SUVs rolled into the parking lot from every direction. They stopped with military precision. Doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women wearing tactical vests stepped out. No lights, no sirens, only discipline. Across the backs of their jackets, 3 white letters caught the afternoon sun. FBI. Deputy Mason's face turned pale. Sheriff, I think they're here for us. Wade scoffed. They're probably asking for assistance. The front doors burst open. The cheerful sound of the reception bell was swallowed by firm voices. Federal agents. Nobody move. The station instantly froze. Deputies looked toward one another in confusion. Several instinctively reached toward their duty belts. Hands where we can see them. The command echoed through the building. Within seconds, the lobby filled with armed federal agents. Commander Mercer walked through the entrance. Calm, focused, his eyes never wandered. They were fixed on one destination, the interrogation room. Wade frowned. What the hell is this? The interrogation room door swung open. Commander Mercer stepped inside. 2 tactical agents followed. Sheriff Wade forced a smile. Commander, you could have called first. Mercer ignored the greeting. His eyes settled on Gabriel. For the first time all day, Gabriel stood. The room became perfectly still. Commander Mercer gave a small nod. Good afternoon, Agent. Wade blinked. Agent. Without a word, one of the federal agents stepped forward, carrying a sealed evidence container. He carefully placed it on the interrogation table, opened it. Inside, Gabriel's wallet, his notebook, his keys, his family photograph, and the plain black pen, the same pen Sheriff Wade had laughed at. The federal agent picked up the pen and handed it to Gabriel. Sorry it took so long to get your equipment back. Gabriel accepted it with a faint smile. No trouble. He clipped the pen back into his jacket pocket, then reached into the evidence container once more. This time, He removed a black leather credential wallet. He opened it slowly. The gold badge caught the light. Beside it, a federal identification card. He held it up. His voice remained calm. Steady, professional, Special Agent Gabriel Kane, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Nobody breathed. Deputy Mason stared in disbelief. The receptionist covered her mouth. One deputy actually took a step backward. Sheriff Wade laughed nervously. This is some kind of joke. Nobody joined him. Commander Mercer looked toward Gabriel. Anything to report? Gabriel nodded. Multiple admissions, bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, destruction of evidence. He glanced toward Wade. And abuse of authority. Every word struck the room like a hammer. Sheriff Wade's smile vanished. You, his voice cracked. You've been recording me. Gabriel reached into his pocket. He removed the black pen, held it between two fingers. It writes the same words the deputy had joked about hours earlier. Then Gabriel clicked the top of the pen. A tiny blue light flashed. Commander Mercer looked toward Wade. It also records silence, absolute silence. Wade's breathing became uneven. You tricked me. Gabriel calmly shook his head. No, you volunteered every word. Commander Mercer stepped closer. His voice carried throughout the station. Sheriff Wade Collins. He removed a folded document from a manila folder. A federal judge has signed warrants for your arrest. He handed copies to nearby agents, as well as search warrants for your office, your home, your vehicles, your financial records, and 14 additional locations connected to this investigation. Deputy Mason stared at a sheriff. 14 locations. This wasn't about one mistake. This was something much bigger. Wade suddenly pointed at Gabriel. You let me arrest you. Gabriel nodded. Yes, you could have stopped me. I could have. Why didn't you? Gabriel looked him straight in the eye. Because the moment you believed you'd won, you stopped being careful. The sheriff's shoulders slowly dropped. Everything, the silence, the patience, the calm, it all made sense now. Commander Mercer gave one final order. Take him. 2 federal agents stepped forward. The unmistakable sound echoed through the room. Click. Steel handcuffs closed around Sheriff Wade Collins' wrists. He stared at them in disbelief. Just hours earlier, those same cuffs had been on Gabriel. Now, they belonged to him. As agents escorted Wade toward the lobby, he looked back one last time. Gabriel stood exactly where he'd been standing all along. Calm, composed, almost expressionless. Then Gabriel spoke, quietly enough that only Wade could hear. Power doesn't reveal who you are. He paused. It reveals who you choose to become. Wade lowered his head. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. The sheriff's office had never been so quiet. Not after a murder. Not after a bank robbery. Not after a tornado warning. Nothing compared to this. Every deputy stood frozen as Sheriff Wade Collins, the man who had spent 15 years barking orders, was now standing in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents. His face had gone pale. He looked around desperately. This is a misunderstanding. No one answered, not even his own deputies. Commander Daniel Mercer handed a folder to one of the tactical agents. "Begin execution." The agent nodded. "Yes, sir." He pressed the radio clipped to his shoulder. "All teams, warrants are active." The response came almost instantly. "Team Alpha moving, Bravo moving, Charlie moving." Within seconds, more than 30 FBI agents spread across Ashwood County. Some headed toward the sheriff's home, others toward warehouses, bank offices, storage units, businesses, even the county records building. The operation that had taken 18 months to build had finally begun. Sheriff Wade stared at Gabriel. "You've been watching me. For how long?" Gabriel looked at him calmly. "A long time. You knew. I knew enough. You let me arrest you. I let you make your own decisions." The sheriff shook his head. "You manipulated me." Gabriel's expression remained unchanged. "No, I gave you opportunities. You chose what to do with them." Those words landed harder than the handcuffs. Deputy Mason finally found his voice. He looked at Commander Mercer. "Sir, are we?" He glanced nervously toward the other deputies. "Are all of us under investigation?" Mercer looked around the room. "If you've served this community honestly, you have nothing to fear." Several deputies visibly relaxed. Others didn't. One older deputy slowly removed his hat. He quietly sat down, without anyone asking. He covered his face with both hands. Across town, the front door of Sheriff Wade's home swung open. Federal agents entered with a signed warrant. FBI, search warrant. They moved quickly, but methodically, through every room. Kitchen, garage, bedroom, home office. One agent stopped beside a large gun safe. "It's locked." Another smiled. "It won't stay that way." Minutes later, the heavy steel door swung open. Inside, rows of hunting rifles, boxes of ammunition, stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands. One agent raised an eyebrow. "Count it." Another agent reached deeper into the safe. He pulled out a leather ledger. Its pages were filled with names, dates, dollar amounts, payments. Commander Mercer listened through his earpiece. "What have you got?" The answer came back. "Looks like a payment book." Mercer's face hardened. "Bag it." At the sheriff's office, another federal agent hurried toward Commander Mercer. "Sir, we've got something." He handed over a flash drive, sealed inside an evidence bag. It was hidden behind a loose brick in the sheriff's office. Mercer turned toward Gabriel. Gabriel immediately recognized it. I was wondering where he'd hidden his insurance policy. Sheriff Wade's head snapped up. "You knew about that too." Gabriel nodded. "I hoped you'd lead us to it." The sheriff closed his eyes. Everything had been slipping away from him long before that morning. He'd simply been too arrogant to notice. Meanwhile, Team Bravo arrived at a large warehouse on the edge of town. The businessman Gabriel had seen earlier stepped outside. Confused. "What is this?" An FBI agent handed him a warrant. "We're conducting a federal search. You can't just..." "We can." The businessman glanced toward the parking lot. Every exit was blocked. His shoulders sagged. He understood. The game was over. Inside the warehouse, agents discovered shelves filled with construction supplies. At first glance, everything looked legitimate. Then one agent noticed fresh scrape marks across the concrete floor. Move that pallet. A forklift pushed several heavy crates aside. Beneath them, a steel hatch. The room fell silent. One agent slowly pulled it open. Everyone stared. Hidden below the warehouse were dozens of boxes, some filled with cash, others with illegal firearms. Several more contained sealed evidence bags marked with Ashwood Sheriff's office case numbers. Commander Mercer listened through the radio. His jaw tightened. Repeat that. The agent swallowed. We've recovered evidence from closed criminal cases. Mercer looked toward Gabriel. Innocent people, Gabriel finished quietly, were probably convicted without it. Back inside the station, Deputy Mason overheard the transmission. His face drained of color. He looked at Wade. You told us. You said all those missing evidence reports were clerical errors. Wade didn't answer. Another deputy stepped forward. What about the Johnson case? No answer. The Ramirez shooting. Silence. The Collins brothers. Still nothing. One by one, deputies began asking questions. Questions they'd been too afraid to ask for years. Now, there was nobody left to fear. Sheriff Wade looked toward Gabriel. His voice was barely above a whisper. You've destroyed everything. Gabriel slowly shook his head. No, you did. I only brought it into the light. At that exact moment, Rachel's voice came through command's radio. Commander, Mercer pressed the transmit button. Go ahead. We've completed interviews with the county clerk. And she just confirmed Sheriff Wade ordered records altered in at least 21 criminal cases. The command vehicle fell silent. Mercer slowly looked around the room, then at Wade. So that's how you kept people quiet. The sheriff stared at the floor. His silence was answer enough. An hour later, television, news vans began arriving outside the sheriff's office. Satellite dishes rose into the sky. Reporters crowded behind police tape. Residents gathered across the street. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. The sheriff they had trusted for years was now the center of the largest corruption investigation in county history. As Wade was escorted toward a waiting federal transport vehicle, he suddenly stopped walking. He turned toward Gabriel one last time. There was no arrogance left in his voice, only confusion, only regret. I still don't understand. Gabriel looked at him. What? You could have told me who you were. He searched Gabriel's face. You could have stopped all of this before it happened. Gabriel held his gaze for a long moment, then answered quietly. You still don't see it. Wade frowned. See what? Gabriel took one slow step closer. The badge didn't make you abuse your power. He paused. It only gave you the opportunity. The sheriff stood speechless. Gabriel's eyes never left his. And that's why I had to let you choose. Wade lowered his head. For the first time in his career, he realized the worst prison wasn't the handcuffs around his wrists. It was knowing every decision that had destroyed his life had been his own. The flashing blue and red lights had disappeared. Now, the parking lot outside the Ashwood Sheriff's office was filled with black SUVs, television, vans lined the opposite side of the street, satellite dishes pointed toward the sky. Reporters spoke into cameras, while residents gathered behind yellow barricades, trying to understand how their sheriff had become the biggest story in the state. Inside, the building felt strangely empty, not because people had left, because the authority that once filled every room had vanished. Sheriff Wade Collins sat alone in an interview room. His wrists were still cuffed. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't the man asking questions. He was the one waiting for answers. The metal door opened. Gabriel Kane stepped inside. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He hadn't changed into an expensive suit. He still wore the same faded denim jacket he'd been arrested in that morning. Only one thing was different. His FBI badge rested openly against his belt. Wade looked at it for several long seconds, then let out a bitter laugh. You planned every bit of this. Gabriel pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. No, I planned the investigation. You planned the truth. Wade frowned. What does that mean? It means, Gabriel replied calmly, I never planned your decisions. Silence settled between them. Finally, Wade looked up. I still don't understand. Gabriel waited. If you were FBI, why didn't you tell me the second I put those handcuffs on you? You would have stopped. Of course, I would have stopped. Gabriel nodded. I know, and every person connected to you would have stopped too. The sheriff stared at him. What are you talking about? Gabriel folded his hands on the table. 18 months ago, the FBI received reports that evidence was disappearing. Witnesses were changing statements. Investigations were being quietly buried. But every time we got close, someone warned the people we were investigating. Wade said nothing. We knew corruption existed. We just couldn't prove how far it reached. So, Gabriel leaned back slightly. Someone had to get close enough for the guilty to stop pretending. The sheriff slowly shook his head. So you moved here. For me? Gabriel smiled faintly. For everyone. Outside the room, Commander Daniel Mercer watched through the observation window. Deputy Mason stood beside him. I've never seen Agent Kane interrogate someone like this. Mercer smiled. That's because he isn't interrogating him. What is he doing? He's letting him confront himself. Inside the room, Wade lowered his eyes. You knew I'd arrest you. Gabriel shook his head. No, I believed you might, but I never forced you. You could have walked into that diner, looked at the surveillance photo, and asked me one question. He paused. You could have checked my identification. You could have called another jurisdiction. You could have asked the robbery victim to identify me in person. You could have done what every good law enforcement officer is trained to do. Gabriel looked directly into Wade's eyes. You chose not to. The sheriff swallowed. You judged me before you investigated me. Gabriel nodded once. Yes, and that wasn't your first time. Those words hit harder than any accusation. Because deep down, Wade knew they were true. Across town, Maggie's diner was packed, not because people wanted breakfast, because every television inside the restaurant was broadcasting live coverage of the arrests, multiple federal search warrants, years-long corruption investigation. Sheriff Wade Collins now in federal custody. The customers who had applauded that morning sat in complete silence. No one touched their food. No one looked at each other. The man who had said, "One less criminal," quietly removed his hat. I was wrong. No one argued, because they all remembered. They hadn't asked questions either. They had trusted the badge, without questioning the man wearing it. Maggie stood behind the counter, drying a coffee mug. She wasn't really cleaning it. She was thinking about Lily, about the terrified little girl who had begged everyone for help, and how not one person had stepped forward. Emma, the waitress, quietly walked beside her. I keep hearing her voice. So do I. I should have said something. Maggie nodded sadly. So should I. At that moment, the bell above the diner door jingled. Everyone turned. Rachel walked inside, holding Lily's hand. The room instantly fell silent. The little girl looked around. She recognized every face, every person who had watched her father being dragged away. Emma slowly approached. Her eyes were full of regret. Lily, the little girl, smiled politely. Hi. Emma struggled to find the words. She swallowed. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for your dad. I didn't. Lily looked at her for a long moment, then smiled gently. My dad says, good people make mistakes too. Emma's eyes filled with tears. But, Lily continued, he also says, what matters is what they choose to do after they realize it. The waitress covered her mouth. She couldn't speak. Several customers quietly stood from their booths. One by one, they approached Lily. The elderly man removed his cap. I'm sorry. Another woman nodded. I believed the sheriff. So did I. So did all of us. Lily listened patiently, then looked around the diner. My dad told me something after Mom died. Everyone waited. He said, never let someone else's mistake teach you to stop believing there are good people. The room became perfectly still, because somehow the smallest person in the diner had just given the biggest lesson. Back at the sheriff's office, Wade stared at the table. His voice barely rose above a whisper. You knew. Gabriel looked at him. The moment I arrested you, you already knew how this was going to end. Gabriel was quiet for several seconds. Then he answered honestly. No. Wade frowned. No. I knew how it could end. The ending, Gabriel said softly, depended entirely on the choices you made. The sheriff slowly closed his eyes. Every threat, every bribe, every shortcut, every innocent person he'd intimidated, every lie he'd told himself, they all came rushing back, not because Gabriel had forced them into the light, because he'd chosen every one of them. He finally looked up. One last question remained. His voice cracked as he asked it. Do you think I was ever a good sheriff? Gabriel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the man sitting across from him, not with hatred, not with satisfaction, but with quiet honesty. I think He paused. You forgot that the badge was supposed to protect people, not protect your pride. The sheriff lowered his head. For the first time in years, he cried. 3 weeks later, the headlines had changed. The satellite trucks were gone. The flashing lights had disappeared. Ashwood had grown quiet again. But it wasn't the same town. Not anymore. The old sign outside the sheriff's office still swayed gently in the morning breeze. Only one thing had changed. Sheriff Wade Collins' name had been removed. In its place hung a simple notice: County Sheriff's Office, Interim Administration. The empty space where his name had once been said more than any newspaper ever could. Inside the courthouse, the largest courtroom in the county, was filled beyond capacity. Reporters occupied the back rows. Residents filled every available seat. Some had traveled from neighboring counties. Others were there because they had waited years for this day. Sheriff Wade Collins entered through a side door, wearing an orange jail uniform. His hands were cuffed. The same man who had once walked through town, expecting everyone to step aside, now couldn't even lift his eyes from the floor. He glanced around the courtroom. No one applauded. No one smiled. There was only silence. The judge adjusted his glasses before speaking. Mr. Collins, you stand charged with bribery, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, official misconduct, conspiracy, and multiple violations of federal civil rights. Each charge echoed through the courtroom. Wade closed his eyes. Hearing them spoken aloud somehow made them more real. The judge continued. How do you plead? His attorney leaned toward him. Wade slowly shook his head, then looked directly at the judge. Guilty. The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. His attorney stared at him in disbelief. Your Honor, I wish to accept responsibility. The judge studied him for a long moment. Very well. Outside the courthouse, Gabriel Kane waited beside a black SUV. He wasn't inside celebrating. He wasn't giving interviews. He wasn't standing in front of cameras. Rachel walked over, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I figured you'd be here. Gabriel accepted one. Thank you. She smiled. You don't like attention. I like results. Rachel laughed softly. Same Gabriel. She looked toward the courthouse. He's pleading guilty. Gabriel nodded. I heard. You expected that. No. I hoped he'd finally tell the truth. Across town, Maggie's diner was busier than ever. Business had actually increased after the story made national news. Tourists stopped by simply because they had seen the restaurant on television. Maggie still hated that reason. She wished people came because of the pancakes instead. Emma stood behind the counter, refilling coffee cups. She looked toward the front window. They're here. Everyone inside turned. A pickup truck quietly pulled into the parking lot. Gabriel stepped out first, then walked around to help Lily climb down. The little girl smiled the moment she saw Maggie. She ran toward her. Maggie opened her arms. Oh, sweetheart. She hugged Lily tightly. I'm so happy to see you. I missed your pancakes. Maggie laughed through watery eyes. I'll make you the biggest stack this town has ever seen. The diner grew unusually quiet. Customers watched Gabriel walk inside, 3 weeks earlier, those same people had watched him being dragged across the floor in handcuffs. Today, every single one of them stood, not because anyone told them to, because respect had finally replaced assumption. The elderly farmer stepped forward first. He extended his hand. "I owe you one more apology." Gabriel shook it firmly. "You already gave me one." "I know, but I needed to say it again." Gabriel smiled. "Then I'll say thank you again." The old man nodded. "Fair enough." The man who had applauded during Gabriel's arrest slowly approached next. He looked embarrassed. "I've thought about that morning every day." Gabriel listened quietly. "I judged you before I knew anything about you." He lowered his head. "My grandson asked me why I clapped." His voice cracked. "I didn't have a good answer." Gabriel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe you do now." The man frowned. "I do. You can tell him that you learned something worth remembering." Emma walked over, carrying 2 plates. One held pancakes, stacked almost as high as Lily's head. The other held Gabriel's usual breakfast. She smiled nervously. "It's on the house." Gabriel reached for his wallet. Emma gently pushed his hand away. "No, please. We all owe you more than breakfast." Gabriel looked around the diner, then quietly said, "You don't owe me anything." Several customers looked surprised. "You owe each other." The room fell silent. Gabriel looked around the restaurant. 3 weeks earlier, fear had kept good people silent. Today, those same people were standing together. He smiled. "That's how communities heal." Lily looked up from her pancakes. "Dad?" "Yes. Can I ask you something?" "Always." She tilted her head. "Were you scared?" Everyone in the diner unconsciously leaned in. Gabriel thought for a moment before answering. "Yes." Several people looked shocked. "You were?" Lily asked. Gabriel nodded. "I wasn't afraid for me. I was afraid you'd lose faith in people." Lily smiled. "I didn't." "Why not?" She looked around the diner. "Because good people came back." No one spoke. Several customers quietly wiped away tears. Gabriel looked around the room one final time. "I've worked a lot of cases. I've arrested dangerous people. I've seen the worst parts of humanity." He paused. "But I've also learned something." The diner remained completely silent. The people who change the world usually aren't the loudest. They're the ones willing to do the right thing, even when everyone else stays quiet. His eyes settled on Maggie, then Emma, then the customers. "So the next time you see someone being judged," he paused, "don't wait for proof that they're innocent before you choose to treat them with dignity." The words settled over the diner like a quiet promise. Later that morning, Gabriel and Lily stepped back into the pickup truck. Before climbing in, Lily looked back at the diner. "Dad, I think this town is going to be okay." Gabriel smiled. "I think so too." They drove slowly down Main Street, past the courthouse, past the sheriff's office, past the people beginning to rebuild something far more important than a reputation. They were rebuilding trust. As the truck disappeared over the hill, the narrator's voice faded in one final time. Authority can force people to obey, but only character can inspire people to follow. And in the end, Character always outlives power.